do beware spoilers. I am Adam on an inordinately hot day. In my car, it is reading 97 degrees, and it feels every degree of it. So, we are now at the end of Ms. Marvel, and I'm able to do this now because I made a realization at work today, and that is when I'm at my desk packing boxes, I do not need to sit there and just listen to whatever book I'm listening to or anything like that. No, I can put on Netflix or Disney Plus or something like that, and I can watch my show while I'm working. And it is a great discovery that has improved my quality of life immensely. Until which point is I'm no longer at the desk, I'll be able to watch TV while I'm at my desk. Because if I'm out in the rest of the office, I can't just walk around watching that. Until which point is we get a virtual reality headset that I can, that's a ways away though. We're talking decades in the future. But as for right now, I can do that. Until which point is I can get paid to do this at a more consistent level that I can afford to live on it and not just make ends meet on the podcast aspect of itself. But all of that notwithstanding, Ms. Marvel is today's big show. Okay, just go ahead, buddy. I was here first. And whatever. Motherfucker in these trucks who think their car has the right of way. So, Ms. Marvel. And I think that my first issue with the show is kind of in common with all of the Disney Plus Marvel Enterprises, which is the middle of them is a slog. It gets boring. And it's like, I think I said this last time, where it's almost as if each episode is written like what's it called? Each show is written like a movie and then broken up along the way. This time, I mean, the thing I really want to talk about is the post-credit scene and the ending of the show. But like, my issue is with this show. I feel like this should have been episode 5, this conflict here, and then episode 6 should have been her facing off against the clandestines. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just, me thinking that's the bigger threat that should probably have the bigger attention pointed to it. That said, this episode did sell me on why this one needed to be the last episode. Although that said, I feel like this whole thing with the powers being transferred to her son feels like it should have been a postscript almost to the end of the story, and the fact that it is brought out to this degree and stretched out to be this entire finale feels, I don't want to say forced, but it feels like they're dragging it out for time. I also don't buy Kamala's parents being okay with her going out and doing superheroics, even if they know what her powers are, considering earlier in this season we have this issue of her talking about, not being able to go to Avengers Con, which is in New Jersey, and all of that. I do think this show probably would the overarching story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe would probably benefit from a season 2 of this coming out before the Marvels, specifically setting up whatever happened at the end of this show. What else is there? Because, hang on. What else was there? I think that, it doesn't make sense to me, I don't think, that yeah, the parents making that transition doesn't quite fly, I don't think. Especially what happened over the course of this show. I think it's too quick of a transformation to go through. What was I saying? I had to look something up. What the fuck was I saying about, Kamala's parents buying into it? Yada, yada, yada. I don't remember. What else was there that I wanted to address with this show? I think that it would have been better had, what's it called? Had the show ended off with, I don't know. The whole thing is the ending is cool, and the ending does kind of hone in on what it is about her and all of that makes her different from the other heroes. I just feel like it could have been better executed, and it feels like almost like this is entirely tacked. It feels kind of like the ending of the Batman with the bombing and the river and all of that, or the harbor all imploding in. It feels a little bit like that, where it's like it's designed to impart this key piece of information of who Kamala is onto the audience, but at the same time it feels kind of disjointed from the rest of the story. We'll talk about the mutant thing. We got our first reference to, in 616 MCU, the first mutant is Kamala. And it is one of those things that, when we talk about her getting her powers, and it feels like this is specifically just to fuck me, because I said this was an Inhuman, because it looks like Terrigenesis with the fucking, I'm annoyed about that, but, and then I did the fucking weekly streaming recap, and I wrote a whole explanation about what Inhumans are and what Terrigenesis is, and it was all for nothing because it's a mutant. But you get the mutants, and we get our first taste of it here. And I like, if there's one thing I like about what they're doing with the introduction of the mutants, now that Marvel has the rights to the X-Men and all of that, is that they're kind of doing a slow rollout of the mutants. And what I mean by that is, we're not getting an introduction into the mutants in a big bombastic way, where it's like, and here are the X-Men, bask in their X-Men-ness. Like we get Professor X from an alternate universe in our first little taste, and that's in what's it called? What's the name? Multiverse of Madness. Then here we get this, and both times they're punctuated by the music from X-Men 97. They're playing the X-Men 97 theme is the musical cue, because we know the X-Men 97 show is coming. And also X-Men 97 is probably when most people think of the X-Men, if they're not thinking of the live-action movies with Hugh Jackman and all of that, they're probably thinking of X-Men 97, the TV show, the Saturday morning cartoon on Fox that was produced by Saban, Haim Saban, who eventually would also do Power Rangers, or did Power Rangers first, and brought that to American audiences from Japan. I think that it's a good idea to do it that way. I like that they're going this route. I'm on board with them going this route. I would like to see a further expansion of that in the future. I would like to see. I'm looking forward to the X-Men 97 show to see how they handle. Because I think that's what it's going to be. Is they're going to use X-Men 97, and it's going to be like, how do the mutants fit into the larger Marvel universe at this point? And I think that her putting the bangle on was kind of awakening the X gene for her, and that'll be cool. I'm looking forward to seeing how that all plays out. I think doing X-Men 97 gives them some fertile ground to play around in, where they can bring in some characters who were around in the 90s and bring them back. They can bring in, what's it called? They can bring in, what's his name? They can bring in Nick Fury. They can bring in who else was there? T'Chaka was around and doing shit. They can bring all these characters in and be like, oh, that's going to be a cool thing to look at. I think if there's one thing I feel like this show, I mean, the show is fine. It's not my favorite, but it's not my least favorite. It's just kind of, like, for me, it's like Captain Marvel. It's just kind of okay. It is perfectly passable. It is fine. It's serviceable. But it's just not as good as some of the other stuff that's offered. And maybe I'll warm up to it. Like, I've warmed up to Hawkeye a little bit since seeing it the first time. I've warmed up to everything that they did in that show. And you know, maybe I will. Maybe I'll warm up to this. Maybe if I rewatch it all the way through, I'll warm up to it. And the same goes for Loki. I didn't particularly care for Loki when I first watched it. But maybe, like, the only one I really liked out of the gate and was like, this is great, I love what they're doing here, I totally understand everything that's going on here, was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But all the rest of them I was kind of like, I mean, I'll watch it, but I'm not sure if it's doing what I'm hoping it will. But, you know, I think that seeing this story, I think that this story really needs to get, especially considering they introduced, like, that's the thing with the end of this show, is that it introduces, another one of Kamala's powers. That's how I viewed it, at least. I didn't view it as her teleport. I think it's meant to be her transporting. Again, I watched it at work, so I kind of had to, you know, I didn't hear the full dialogue of the sequence, which I don't think there was much dialogue, but I think it's meant to be Kamala transformed into looking like Miss Marvel, or Captain Marvel. And I'm, instead of flipping and sending her out to wherever the fuck Captain Marvel is, possibly flying around space, yes, without a spacesuit, possibly leaving Kamala for dead somewhere. I would be interested to, like, I feel like a second season of this is more needed. I'm also kind of disappointed about damage control, because I feel like damage control isn't being used very well in this show. I feel like that's part of the problem. I feel like damage control could definitely be better implemented here and in other shows. Because, like, I'm not entirely sure what their organizational role is, or what their goal is, or who's in charge of them. Like, is damage control under the control of Thunderbolt Ross? Is that who we're like, oh, okay, so Thunderbolt Ross is the one controlling it? Well, I would say probably not, because William Hurt died. Is it under the control of Val, Julia Louis-Dreyfus? I would say that's probably more likely, just considering they're hunting down young mutates or mutants or whatever the fuck they call them. They call them enhanced. Like, I feel like that's an important thing to distinguish. And people who get upset about Kamala being a mutant now, let's keep in mind where Miss Marvel came from. At the time that Miss Marvel was created, it was 2014, I want to say. And at the time, Marvel Studios was still under the thumb a little bit of Marvel Entertainment and hadn't quite split out yet. Marvel Entertainment still had a lot of say in what was going on, and Marvel Entertainment did not want to put a publishing focus in creating characters for studios that weren't Disney. They did not want to create characters that would go to the X-Men. They did not want to create characters that would go to Spider or Spider adjacent. I mean, the only real notable character who was added in either of those categories between then and now was Gwen Stacy's Spider-Man. And that was only because Gwen Stacy was already a Spider-adjacent character. So creating a Spider-Gwen wasn't going to create a new character that they couldn't capitalize on. But if they created a new character altogether, that would be a problem. So I think and at the time too, there was a big Humans push, because Marvel had the cinematic and television rights to the Inhumans and the Inhuman Royal Family and Attilan and all that cool stuff. So, like, because they had that, there was this push to get more Inhumans in the into characters that would do that. And if I remember my history correctly, I believe Rogue was briefly Miss Marvel. Maybe it was just that I think she ran Miss Marvel powers and had Miss Marvel's powers. But she definitely had powers from Carol. I don't know if she temporarily took up the mantle too. But look, and again, I said this morning when I was talking about Shadow of the Sith. I said it's not a documentary, to quote the great John Boyega, and that applies for Marvel too. We're not doing a documentary. It's not a recreation of real events. It's not any of that kind of stuff. This is a retelling of like an alternate universe version of the characters from the comics. This is not a cinematic, adaptation of the comics, and that's always been Marvel's MO from the beginning. And I think that most superhero movies work best when they're not doing a one-to-one adaptation of a story we already know. Because what works in a comic doesn't always work on the screen, and vice versa. And the idea that Marvel is going to do this kind of this is not a one-to-one origin for Kamala, and I think this is the real only time that they really changed. No, it's not the first time they've changed, because they did not make Black Widow a super soldier. Because Black Widow is a super soldier in the comics. She's as powerful as Captain America, if I remember correctly. But if I remember correctly, but wasn't the Black Widow program meant to be the Russian analog to the super soldier program, where that the super soldier serum, or the Russian equivalent of it, was given to Black Widow, and she had her powers. She had the same powers. I feel like there are more this isn't the first time they've changed power sets to suit the story, but whatever. I mean, cool, I guess. And look, again, not a one-to-one adaptation, and things can change just purely from the fact that it is more, whatever benefits the story, make those changes. And the core of who Kamala is the same. And I think that's an important aspect of it. I just feel like the next time we see Kamala, as indicated by the credits, will be in the Marvels, and that will also be the next time we see Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. Which, by the way, I commend Marvel for not directly commenting on all of the rumors that Brie Larson is hard to work with, and no one likes her, and everyone wants her out, and all of that kind of misogynistic bullshit you hear from the conservative contingent of fandom about her, because they just don't like her. I'm happy that they didn't comment on it, but at the same time, any opportunity they've had to put her in something where she doesn't necessarily have to be, they've done it. Like, here, okay, I would have been genuinely surprised if she didn't make an appearance, but they put her in, what's it called? They put her in, that other one, too, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. She's there, and it's well, that's cool. I think my only thing is, that's throwing me is the hair being the way it is. I don't think she had that haircut, there, I think that's why we know it's a whatever. But I think we need more story. Otherwise, the Marvels, despite having 16 episodes of TV to set it up, will still end up feeling kind of bloated. Because without having, I feel like that could have been, the Marvels probably could have been a Disney Plus show, but I feel at the same time if they moved Captain Marvel to a Disney Plus show, that would have been seen by some as a failure, even though it's not for anyone else. But I feel like if we're looking at it this way, and we're looking at it where at this point we have Kamala, who the post-credit scene shows she's not in full control of her powers. And all of that. We have Captain Marvel, who is in space doing God knows what, and then also dealing with this resurgence of weird Earth artifacts that have ties to extra-dimensional activity. And then we have Monica Rambeau, who also has these powers, but last we've seen her, it was in, what's it called? The last time we saw her was in WandaVision. We haven't seen her since. So by the time next July comes around, we have a lot of narrative ground to cover to just bring the audience up to speed on who these characters are, where they are, and what's going on. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot that needs to be done in a relatively short amount of time, namely the runtime of a feature-length movie. If it's at most 2.5 hours. I mean, if it goes down to 2:06, which I think was how, like, Captain Marvel was, like, a little over 2. And if that's the case, that's a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot that needs to be done in a very short amount of time, and I don't know if there's the indication that they'll be able to do that. I'd rather err on the side of caution and be like, can we get, like, a little bit more to do here? But that we don't have to worry about till July of next year. We have a full year to work, like, until we see, Kamala again. Unless they do another season of Ms. Marvel quickly, and then it leads directly into it, which I guess is well, no, it's not likely, because I think if it doesn't come out this year, then Secret Invasion goes to early next year. Then also Loki is next year, and they're not going to compete against themselves. And then also Echo is next year. So I don't think it's likely we get Ms. Marvel until 2024, the earliest. It's just, I feel like more could have been done to make this movie, to connect the dot a little bit clearer to where we're going next. I feel like that would have been an interesting idea. So the thing that made me think it was teleporting when I first watched it was seeing, seeing like the way they did it looked a little bit like with the portkey use, or the apparition in Harry Potter. That's what made me go like, oh, okay, she's doing that. And it's like, well, no, that's not what she's doing. It is interesting, though. This might be one of the few times I gotta read a Ending Explained article about this show. What else is there? I think that's really it. I know I've been hard on the show, but the show is really not that bad. It's not awful. It's fine, and it's like, look, if you like, there's so much about the show that works in its favor, the art style and all of that. It's just, I think that the problem with Marvel as it is now, and I'm guilty of this too, is that we've come to expect a level of interconnectivity that they're not doing anymore. But also, they're not really giving us the warning about said lack of interconnectivity. Where everything's kind of standalone, everything's kind of in its own situation. Like, look at the post-credit scene from the movies that have happened recently. It's not leading into the next thing, whereas, like, look, there's a world where the post-credit scene for Thor, Love and Thunder could have and should have been a tease for Black Panther, because that's the next movie. Black Panther is the next movie, and it's not like there isn't a way to do that, where it's like you do, like, I would have done like 1 week, or I don't know how long the movie takes place over, but you do a flashback sequence to Gore facing off against the Panther goddess that gives the heart-shaped herb to the people of Wakanda, if I remember correctly. If that's the case, I feel like there was definitely something where there was a goddess involved with giving the powers to them. But anyway, you do that, and then you show, like, she beats Gore, and then Gore, and then she gives the the herb to heal Wakanda, and then it just says Black Panther will return. And that would have been, you know, a great tease for Wakanda Forever, and then you can do that. That would have made more sense to me. You could have done that with the gods of Lemuria, to set up Namor. That would have also worked in that regard. There's a world in which Multiverse of Madness teases Quantumania a little bit better. And I think that because these aren't doing that, what they're doing is they're teasing the next entry in their own franchise, which is fine, and it's what most of these movies would do. It's just in the past we would expect some kind of setup outside of the universe, outside of what's going on. Like, there's no reason why Eternals doesn't set up anything besides more Eternal stuff. There's no reason why Multiverse of Madness does nothing but set up more. Like, there's a world where you show Earth 616's Reed Richards, or you show 616's Professor X, or you show 616's Adelan. Like, to be like, this is coming, this is happening, but they show Clea, and if you don't know who Clea is, and you aren't watching, like, at least I will give Love and Thunder that when they introduced, and I'm going to put the spoiler warning in, when they introduced Hercules, at least they said, like, come forward, my son Hercules, to be like, oh, okay, so this is Hercules, I know who this is now. Unlike in the other one, you know, unlike in Multiverse of Madness, where it's like, and here is, what's it called? Here is, Clea, and it's, if you don't look at the credits, you don't know she's Clea, unless you know who Clea is. Like, I knew it was Clea, I'm like, oh shit, I know, like, that's gonna be cool. But if you don't know, it's nothing. And the same goes for, like, what's it called? Like, even Loki, when they introduced Kang at the end of it, it's like, oh, okay, so there's Kang the Conqueror, that's a big deal. But they don't call him Kang. If it, like, and again, if it weren't for the fact that they had announced via tweet for Quantumania that Kang the Conqueror was going to be the bad guy, like, we wouldn't know that Jonathan Majors is Kang. And the same goes for Mahershala Ali's cameo at the very end of, what's it called? At the very end of that other one, Eternals. And even, like, if it weren't for the fact that fucking Patton Oswalt comes out in really shitty CG and goes like, brother of Thanos, Thane, or whatever the fuck his name is, I think it's Thane, like, we wouldn't know who Harry Styles is playing. Like, all of these things are kind of big, you know, things that are setting up sequels within franchises. But at the same time, they're not setting up outside of the franchise themselves. So you're losing a little bit of the interconnectivity, but not gaining too much in exchange. And I feel like that's a trade-off that shouldn't have been made. I feel like the interconnectivity was a bigger part of what made Marvel work than over, especially DC, where, like, DC, this kind of post-credit scene setting up, okay, so next time, like, the post-credit scene for Shazam sets up Mr. Mind. And it's like, okay, that's cool. And they also set up, the other one was Black Adam. And it's like, okay, those are going to be within this franchise. That makes sense. Very limited connectivity with a wider DCEU. Like, the post-credit scene for Wonder Woman, did Wonder Woman have a post-credit scene? I know Wonder Woman 1984 did, which brought back Linda Carter, and set that up for the sequel. Like, it is within the franchise. But Marvel has done this thing where it's like, you know, you went to see Ant-Man. The post-credit scene of Ant-Man was a scene from Civil War. And the idea that, like, you know, when we talk about Ant-Man specifically, Ant-Man was directed by Edgar Wright until there was a mandate to put in the fight with Falcon. When he goes to the Avengers compound and he fights Falcon on the roof. Like, until that, like, that was, by all reports, that's the thing that caused the schism that led to Edgar Wright's departure. And had that not been the case, he would have been on. And that's a level of interconnectivity we have not really seen since. But we'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back with our next big story whenever that happens. I think the next thing we have coming is when the Crawdads sing, coming up this weekend on Friday. I'm going to do that psychedelic show. It's not just psychedelics, but it's also how to upgrade your mind, something like that. It's based on a book. I'm going to do that documentary, and also I watched a documentary while I was at work today, The Future of by Verge. We'll be talking about that too, probably tomorrow morning. But until then, have a great rest of your week.